Great. Hello, everybody. How are we today?
Good.
Good, okay, thank you. My name is Sarah Colley. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator here at the Great Falls Public Library. So welcome to the library, welcome to the Cordingley Room. We're stoked to have you all here. Today's presentation is going to be about American Prairie and what they do and all of the information and education that's out there. Just to get us started, in case you need to use the restroom at any time, it's out the door and to the right, and then the emergency staircase is also out the door and to the right again. In case of an emergency, please don't take the elevator, and I will escort us all out. This program is going to be about 45 minutes long, and then we'll have time for question and answer afterwards. So please stick around and engage with all of that. And then they also brought a whole bunch of swag and information and maps over there. So walk away with something, because they got a lot over there. So thank you all for being here. We are excited to present American Prairie.
Hey.
Should I turn this on, Sarah? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just in case.
All right. Hopefully that's plenty loud. I'm a loud person, but between me and the mic, hopefully you'll be able to hear me. But just shout if I'm starting to go down in volume. Thank you so much for coming tonight, coming out on your Tuesday night, and thank you to Sarah and the library for having us. I'm Corey Williamson. I'm American Prairie's Community Outreach Director. And with me is my colleague Dusty Rixford. She's our education manager, and she's going to jump in and present with me as well. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview, talk about how and why American Prairie came to be, and some of our programs and initiatives, ways that we collaborate, and Dusty will join in and talk about the education work that American Prairie does in our field school and getting students out on the ground, or just providing them an opportunity to learn about and fall in love with the prairie. I'd like to start with this image often when I'm introducing people to the American Prairie idea. And it's just a map of our national parks around the country. And I think it's just interesting to look at it and reflect a little bit on what have we chosen to preserve as Americans? What have we protected and set aside? And I think there's a lot of great cultural and ecological and historical diversity in our parks, and we're proud to have them. But one of the things that is missing from what we have protected in the US is a prairie or grassland ecosystem at scale. I'm going to talk about that concept of ecosystem scale a little bit more. And so I'll define it as being an ecosystem that is big enough to be self-sustaining, essentially, that has its historical flora and fauna in place, that has enough space for them to move and migrate, to exchange genes, that is resilient in the face of extreme change and natural disasters, which are all part of ecological systems, things like fire, drought, hard winters, hot summers, all of which we have in abundance on the prairies of Montana. And in the 1990s, the late 90s, a group of scientists got together from the Nature Conservancy and World Wildlife Fund and other groups, and they said, how are our grasslands doing around the world? And they sort of looked at temperate grassland ecosystems across the globe, and they said, how big would these ecosystems have to be to sort of function at ecosystem scale, to be resilient in this way? And are there any places where we could still do that? And how big would they have to be? And what they determined was that you need a good chunk of prairie. You probably need around 3.2 million acres, 5,000 square miles. It's about Glacier and Yellowstone National Parks put together, or the size of the state of Connecticut. And they said, where in the world could you still accomplish this? And there's really only 4 places where there's enough native prairie left where you could preserve something at that scale, that 3 million acre scale. The Kazakh steppe, the Mongolian steppe, the Patagonian steppe, and the Northern Great Plains. And I'm happy to tell you that there are now grassland preservation projects, large-scale projects going on in all of these places. And a couple of my colleagues have been to the Altan Dala project in Kazakhstan, and to the Rewilding Argentina park work that's happening with Tompkins Conservation on the Patagonian steppe. So really neat work happening, not just here, but worldwide. But why here? Like, why Montana? And if you think about the Great Plains historically, I'm gonna move around. It would have been this. Right? The Great Plains would have stretched between, from Canada into Mexico, across the US, about 700 million acres. On the continent, about 400 million in the US alone. But in that same study in the 1990s, where scientists said grasslands are our least protected and most endangered ecosystem on the planet, there's only a few places where we could protect them at scale. Where could we do this on the Great Plains? And they said right here in north central eastern Montana, for two main reasons. One is that there's still so much native prairie that's intact. Right? So a lot of prairie is lost around the world because it gets plowed. It gets turned up for crops and agriculture, which are necessary and important. But we've lost a lot of that native prairie. We still have it in Montana. For the last 150 years or so, it's been grazed mostly by cattle. It's grazed by bison for 10,000 plus years before that. But we still have that grass in place. We also have a ton of public land, right? Land that is stewarded by the government for you and me in this part of Montana. So let's go on a little kind of visual land ownership journey together. Actually, wait, I have one more slide, I got ahead of myself. So stemming from that study in the 90s, the scientists said, we can do this work here. We can do this work in Montana, and we just need an entity, an organization to make it happen, to get it off the ground. And so American Prairie was formed in 2001, so we're coming up on 25. We're still young, we're still svelte, we're sleek. And our mission is to create the largest nature reserve in the continental United States, a refuge for people and wildlife preserved forever as part of America's heritage. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. All of our work, all of our funding comes from private donors, people like you, thousands of people around Montana, around the country who are excited and moved by this work. And when we talk about this mission, we usually say it has three pillars that are important to it. And that's land, wildlife, and people. And the concept of American Prairie is a place, an ecosystem where all of these things can thrive. So I'm going to talk, and Dusty's going to join me in talking about each of those things tonight. But let's start with land. Can you tell where you are? Kind of. Let me point some things out. Missouri River, cutting through the middle of the image. Fort Peck Reservoir, kind of widening out over there on the east side. Down here is Lewistown, where Dusty and I live. We've got the Judith Mountains and the Moccasins. This is the Judith River, Arrow Creek, the Little Rockies and the Bear's Paw. Let's layer in some things that look a little more familiar. Right, some roads and towns, Lewistown, Winnett, Jordan, the Aniakota community at Fort Belknap, Chippewa Creek Tribe at Rocky Boy. And if you keep building this out, this is the Charles M. Russell Wildlife Refuge. It's a 1 million acre, federally protected public wildlife refuge managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It initially was formed in the 1930s as a game range, so it's been around for almost 100 years. And essentially, if you want to think about it in a really simple way, American Prairie is working to make it bigger. Right? So the refuge is kind of the anchor of the American Prairie Project. Right? If you need 3 million acres of protected land that are managed for wildlife and public access and recreation, there's 1 million of it. Right? There's 1/3 of the way to that vision.
So are the little squares private land?
Those are state inholdings.
Okay.
Those like the scattered state lands
Okay.
that are inside the boundaries of the refuge, that are usually managed
Sure.
alongside the whatever surrounds them. And yeah, feel free to throw questions at me as we go if you'd like. That now is showing you the Upper Missouri River Breaks National Monument. It's around 380,000 acres. Has anybody floated the breaks? Has anybody done this on the canoe? Put it on your bucket list. Yeah, Sarah's done it. It's amazing. The White Cliffs, I mean, this is country that looks much like it did when Lewis and Clark passed through, and it's really beautiful. So again, federally protected, managed by the Bureau of Land Management for public access, for recreation. Now it gets a little more fun. So what you're seeing now is the mix of public and private in this region. So the pale green is public land, mostly managed by the Bureau of Land Management for grazing. So usually kind of leased back to people in the region, largely for cattle ranching. And then the white is private land. So the American Prairie model is to purchase private land on the free market when it's for sale from people who want to sell it to American Prairie. We call this a willing buyer, willing seller model, and kind of glue together this patchwork of public and private land to expand a focus on habitat and wildlife restoration and a place for people to recreate in the grasslands. So this map is a couple years old. I should say it's a little bit dated, but essentially those dark pieces, those are deeded private land parcels that American Prairie has purchased. So I'm going to draw your attention to that far eastern or far right block. See those little dark green sections? And now, those come with an associated public land grazing allotment. So when you hear ranchers talk about like their home place out in this part of the world, they're probably talking about 2,000 or 3,000 acres of private land that they own, and then maybe 10 or 15,000 acres of public land that is tied to that base property, and they are given stewardship and management of that property in collaboration with the Bureau of Land Management, who they lease it from. American Prairie uses that same model. And so we purchase land, but we also then become managers, kind of co-managing the public land that's stewarded for all of us by the federal government. So this is the most up-to-date American Prairie map, right? This is the way it looks as today. And American Prairie, as of late last year, now owns or manages a little over 500,000 acres. The majority of that is public, and then a portion of it is private deeded. And so pushing towards, in connection with these other big refuges or properties managed by agencies, pushing towards that 3.2 million acres. And when I look at this map, the thing that always stands out to me is not just like, well, that's what American Prairie's got so far. The thing that stands out to me is that there's no way to get there. There's no way to achieve this 3.2 million acre vision of functioning, thriving prairie ecosystem, a vital, healthy community for central Montanans without partnership and collaboration, without multi-jurisdictional management of some of the last remaining prairie on Earth.
So when American Prairie's done, it's not going to be a nice rectangle, is it?
No, probably not. Absolutely not. And in the early days, American Prairie used to sometimes sort of draw a bubble around the region, and that was really intimidating to people because people would be like, well, my ranch is in that bubble, right? Or I'm in that bubble. And I think, yes, the way to think of it now is much more amoeba-like and much more, yes, it's always going to be sort of, hopefully as contiguous as possible, but there are going to be people who ranch out there and families who stay out there for many more generations and hopefully hundreds of years, and that's good, right? Because that is also diverse, multi-jurisdictional management, and if we can figure out how to do more together, the project just gets bigger, right? The effect just gets bigger. I'm going to show one more map. This one feels really important to me. This is from the Office of Public Instruction here in Montana, showing the historic homelands and tribal territories of Indigenous people in Montana, and then their reservations today. And of course, all of the public land that we enjoy, that we love, was carved from these historic homelands and these territories. And so I think it's really important in conservation work today to acknowledge these homelands, to represent and consult with, and do what we can to work with tribal communities, And tribes are leaders in conservation, in the protection of biodiversity, and species reintroduction. And I think there's a really neat trend in the past few years moving towards co-management and co-stewardship, particularly on public lands with tribal communities. And I'll talk a little bit more here in a minute about some of the ways that American Prairie collaborates with some of our indigenous neighbors. I talked a little bit about this idea of vanishing grasslands and the importance of this ecosystem, but obviously the wildlife, the flora, the fauna of this region is part of what makes this project really important, and part of what moves people to support it and love it or not, right, depending on how they feel about sharing the landscape with these other animals. And so, we're in Lewis and Clark country here, and so I think it's fun to remember that part of how we know the incredible richness and incredible numbers of wildlife that used to live and roam across this part of the world, this part of Missouri River country, it's from those Lewis and Clark journals, right? And right here in central Montana, this is where Lewis looked out across the prairie and talked about one common and boundless pasture of elk and buffalo and deer. And it only took about 100 years, right, for many of these animals to be pushed off the prairie and pushed to the brink of extinction. Of course, grizzly bears, now we often think of them as living in the mountains, living on the Rocky Mountain front, living in Yellowstone or in Glacier. But they are prairie animals, and certainly Lewis and Clark encountered a lot of grizzly bears on the trail. There's one of my favorite quotes from Lewis where he's reflecting on having to run into these bears and shooting some of these bears and protecting the expedition from these bears. And he says, "These bear being so hard to die, I confess I do not like the gentleman." But the bears will come back if we tolerate them and if we give them space. And they are. And they're coming down from their refugia in the mountains back onto the prairie. And this is a photo of a grizzly bear taken on a camera trap on one of American Prairie's properties on the PN, where the Judith River runs into the Missouri. It's the first photograph of a bear this far east in 100 years. And if you're paying attention to bird populations, you know that birds are in trouble. And in particular, grassland birds have the steepest decline of any bird species around the world as their habitat vanishes. So a big part of the American Prairie vision, the work that we do, is restoring wildlife, restoring the landscape, rewilding, we sometimes call it. And American Prairie sometimes gets labeled as a bison project, right? And bison are charismatic and they're controversial, but we're a whole ecosystem project. That's the point. And so we often think of the prairie as having 3 key ecosystem engineers, like a huge diversity of flora and fauna, but that 3 species are really integral in creating and shaping that habitat. Including these guys, prairie dogs, who provide food for carnivores on the prairie, who provide really essential habitat for some kind of birds that only want that short, shorn grass that prairie dogs create out on open landscapes. They provide safety and tunnels and burrows for snakes and burrowing owls and all kinds of critters. And so part of our work is doing plague mitigation to protect prairie dogs, working with partners and neighbors around tolerating these guys because they're still often considered a pest and shot or poisoned. Beavers are another really important ecosystem engineer, raising water tables, helping shade-giving trees, aspen, cottonwood, willow, to survive. Again, creating all of this habitat for other species. And they're not gone, they're much reduced. This is a photo from one of American Prairie's properties. So we're also working to kind of welcome back beavers, including through constructing what we call beaver dam analogs, which are sticks kind of set upright in creeks with other sticks woven through them that mimic the impact of a beaver, and sort of say to the beavers, hey, we started this for you, come on back. And lots of landowners, lots of ranchers are doing this in this part of the world right now. It's really cool to see.
It's the big thing.
It is the big thing
Big
now.
ranchers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one tool, it's one way to try to hasten the return of some of those species without reintroduction.
There's a field trip in July on the Sebin Ranch
Oh, neat.
where they've started doing this.
That's cool. That's a beautiful property. I'll keep that in mind. And then we do other restoration work, right? We don't buy a lot of
You
crop
restore
ground.
bathtubs?
Yes, that's headed straight to someone's fancy house. Yeah, we do some reseeding of prairie. We don't buy a lot of crop ground or a lot of plowed ground, but we occasionally purchase a piece that has some of that. So we'll do some reseeding and replanting of native grasses. We will do quite a bit of junk removal. So we have a colleague, his name is Lars Anderson. This is like his baby. He can tell you to the ton how many tons of scrap metal he's taken to the recycling, to be recycled or to be sold. We call him our junk ecologist. We do some other, stream restoration work and generally, removing obstacles from the landscape, taking down obsolete fence, replacing traditional fence with wildlife-friendly fencing that allows pronghorn to go under, that includes flagging on the wires so that sage grouse and owls and other animals don't run into those fences on the prairie. And of course, bison. So in 2005, American Prairie reintroduced 16 bison to the landscape where they hadn't been for probably 120 years. And we now have somewhere between 900 and 1,000 bison spread across 2 different properties. We're committed to large groups of bison on large landscapes. We don't want a few little bison over here and a few little bison over here. We want bison moving and migrating and traveling across big spaces where they can have some of that historical ecological impact that they had for the thousands of years that they shaped the prairie.
So would it work to have little groups here and there? Or are they more of a herd animal where they, we need to go see Aunt Margaret tomorrow?
They are very much herd animals. They have really interesting fission fusion behavior. Like in August, they all come back together for the rut, right? And they form these huge groups. They behave differently when they're calving. They behave differently in sort of early summer, and you'll get these small little splintered groups. You get these bulls off on their own. So it's hard to say what would work exactly, but generally what we want to see is these big groups that can, graze heavily over here, ignore this part for this year, circle back to it next year, have that sort of like large-scale movement that, we can't yet reproduce what bison would have been able to do 200 years ago. The idea is to get as close as we can to that. It's really important that our bison are healthy, that they stay home, that they're disease-free. We are subject to Department of Livestock laws because in the state of Montana, bison are livestock, they're not wildlife. And so we have to manage them as responsible livestock owners. We have agreements with the Phillips County Conservation District to do disease testing and handling every so often and test representative animals from the herds or test a representative number. And so we do have essentially a roundup or a bison handling every couple of years on the prairie. And that is something that's really special to me to be a part of, to get that close to these animals, to work these animals with their kind of dignity and respect intact. And I'm going to show a quick video of a bison moving through these squeeze chutes and entering into the squeeze so it can be handled. And we use low stress handling techniques that were, pioneered by people like Temple Grandin and Bud Williams.
Is that open to the public?
We do invite neighbors and conservation district folks and other partners, and so if that's something you're ever interested in seeing, you can definitely follow up with me on that. This is a cow that's been in the squeeze chute, and she's been outfitted with a GPS tracking collar by our partners at the Smithsonian to study her movements.
She's not happy.
Bison they don't want to be treated like livestock.
Weird.
Yeah, but they're also really resilient, amazing animals. One last note about wildlife restoration. One of the really cool things about being neighbors with sovereign tribal nations is that they can do species reintroduction because they've decided they want to. As a private landowner, We can't just be like, well, we're gonna bring back bears over here, and we're gonna bring back beavers over here. We don't have the jurisdiction or the authority to do that. But tribes can make these decisions for themselves. And so starting about 5 years ago, the Fort Belknap community began working with our partners at the Smithsonian and some other partners to source swift fox, which are these tiny little like house cat sized foxes that have been extirpated from the prairie during the period when we were practicing a lot of carnivore extermination and trying to get rid of wolves and coyotes. These guys fell prey to that too. But the Fort Belknap community reintroduced them onto the reservation, and data and tracking collars are showing that they're leaving and they're going north into Canada, and they're coming south down to Lewiston, and they're coming to American Prairie, and they're coming back. And it's a really beautiful story. On the right there is a YouTube video produced by the Smithsonian that has some interviews with people from the community and tells that story of the reintroduction. I really encourage you to check that out. It's very moving.
Saturday, there's a program out at the First Peoples on the
Oh,
Swift Fox.
oh, cool. Yeah, go learn about them. They're so neat. They're so cute.
So what's their primary diet?
They eat a lot of prairie dogs.
Oh, really?
They'll eat bugs and
Sure.
rodents and stuff, but they will use prairie dog towns. They'll burrow into them.
They're small enough.
Yeah, they're small enough. So they need those prairie dog communities to survive. So I've talked about wildlife, I've talked about land, I want to talk about people now. And I want to talk about some of the ways that we collaborate and we work with our neighbors and work with communities. It's a little hard to see, but this is a photo of the Northern Lights over 3 teepees on our Antelope Creek campground. And a couple years ago, we worked with a friend in the Ani Nakota community to host a platoon of his fellow veterans from the Iraq War who had fought together in the Battle of Fallujah. And he wanted to bring them to the prairie, introduce them to his culture, take them on a traditional bison hunt, do a sweat with them. And so we worked with him to kind of open up our campground early so that those veterans could have this really incredible experience kind of out on the prairie. And they set up 3 teepees there for 3 fallen comrades and spent a week on the prairie. As I mentioned, Indigenous communities are our neighbors, they're conservation leaders, they're people that we collaborate with really regularly. Obviously, bison are a place we find a lot of common ground. I believe all the tribal nations in Montana have bison and have brought bison back to their communities. American Prairie and the Confederated Salish Kootenai back in 2021 gifted 11 bison to the Rocky Boy community to help them start their own herd. They have a really cool program now. They're doing a ton of work with food sovereignty. And that photo on the left is some of our team members being honored at the Rocky Boy powwow last summer as part of the Buffalo family. We also work with partners at Fort Belknap, the Nakota Ani Economic Development Corporation and Ani Nakota Tours on programming, interpretive guiding, holding events at our center in Lewistown. We're a research partner on the Intertribal Grasslands Network, which is a really cool partnership of tribal colleges and buffalo programs across the High Line, looking at the ecological impacts of buffalo on the prairie and really kind of building the next generation of buffalo managers and fish and game biologists and researchers. We also have a great partnership with Ani Nakota Tours that Dusty will talk about in a minute here with the field school. And then we have about a quarter of the participants in our Wild Sky program live in Fort Belknap, and I'll talk about that here in just a second.
Well, there's a wild sheep.
So, it's really important to me, it's my personal belief, it's American Prairie's belief, that the American Prairie model and agriculture can coexist and collaborate on the landscape. And I think if you think about sort of the long-term vision of, when American Prairie is done, what will that look like? Who do we want to be our neighbors? I want our neighbors to be conservation-minded ranchers who love the land, care about the health of the land and the animals on that land. And so there's a couple ways that American Prairie works with agricultural neighbors and with ranching neighbors. One is leasing back land. So, 500,000 acres that American Prairie owns or manages, 88% of that last year was actually leased back to cattle ranchers. So bison are on less than 10% of those properties. Again, about 900 bison, somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 cows on that landscape. And we do that to maintain management rights. We do that to put grazing herbivores on the prairie, because prairie evolved with grazing herbivores and it needs them. And to work with our neighbors and to build trust and collaboration in the region and work together towards a vital central Montana. Another way that we work with our ranching neighbors is a Wild Sky program, which is essentially a way to thank people and incentivize landowners for tolerating wildlife, which they're already doing, right? Because a lot of landowners, a lot of ranchers provide a lot of acres and habitat for wild animals. So this program is essentially saying, thank you for doing that. How can we do more of that and make sure that this isn't affecting your bottom line? And so there's two ways to participate in the Wild Sky program. One is to sign a wildlife-friendly landowner agreement and to say, I'm gonna hire a range rider to look after my cows in the rugged breaks country, which is the photo on the left. American Prairie will help pay for that range rider who can help prevent carnivores and predators from preying on herds. You in this program could replace some of your traditional fence with wildlife-friendly fence. You could agree to fence out cattle from riparian areas. You could come up with your own project that you want to do that's conservation on your property, and American Prairie will help pay for some of that work. The other way is the Cameras for Conservation program, which essentially puts out a bunch of camera traps on participating properties and pays the landowner a check for every photo of wildlife that comes off those cameras. So $25 for a picture of a coyote, $50 for a picture of an elk, $100 for a prairie dog town, $500 for a wolf or a grizzly bear. We've never written that check yet. Maybe someday.
That bear is going to be coming pretty soon.
They are. Grizzly bears are coming, and so sort of working towards bear awareness, bear smart communities, conservation compatibility, bear dumpsters, whatever resources this program can help provide. That's a really big priority for that program this year. This was a cinnamon phase black bear, and again, that property owner got a $250 check just for that picture.
Do you have moose on that list?
Yeah.
Okay. Because they're next.
Yeah, no, there's some moose out there. Some moose along the Judith and in the Snowies. Yeah, so $50 for a photo of a moose. I know we have camera trap photos of moose. Right now, there's about 70,000 acres enrolled in this program. Really cool partnership, really big impact. I think the goal is 90,000 acres by the end of this year. So again, just working together, finding ways as partners and as neighbors to tolerate wildlife, to help the prairie thrive. Integral to American Prairie's mission is public access, right? And this is something that I run into people and they're still like, wait, I can just go out there? I can just walk around, I can go for a hike, I can bike out there, I can bird watch, I don't have to call you, I don't have to make a reservation online, I don't have to pay. No, this is part of the point, is to share it. So American Prairie is a great place to camp, to play, to hike. I'll talk a little bit more about that kind of at the end of the program. And we do also provide hunting access on our private land. So we're in the top 5 block management holders in the state of Montana because we think that hunting is a way to educate and create the next generation of conservationists. It is the oldest method of wildlife management that we have, and we do it in conjunction with our own staff, consultation with FWP, and we do it in such a way that we're making smart decisions and also encouraging wildlife numbers to grow sustainably. And our promise to hunters, our promise to all visitors is that American Prairie should be wilder every time you come.
No, you do need permission to hunt.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you need on the public lands,
Right.
you don't. You need your license and such. And then on the block management, you call and you make a reservation through the block management program, or you can sign in depending on whether it's type 1 or type 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't just go out and shoot stuff. Cool. Thank you, Sarah. We think that American Prairie is just an unparalleled place providing really amazing opportunities for science and research to learn about bison being bison. And so we work primarily with the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute, although we host researchers and graduate students and groups from University of Montana and MSU and Clemson and places all over the country who want to send students and researchers out to learn about the prairie. These are just a couple of the research projects that have happened over the last few years. Things like looking at how bison impact biodiversity along stream systems, looking at bison movement and mammal distribution, looking at grassland bird biodiversity, using sound and sound ecology recordings to determine diversity on the landscape, swift fox reintroduction program. And we're seeing some really neat research come out of this and papers being published. Yes, sir?
What are ARUs? Bottom row.
Actually don't know. Good question. Dusty, do you know? I don't know if that's a tracking device. I assume it is.
It says to monitor.
I mean, that's Andy Boyce putting a tracking device on a curlew. So that would make sense to me, but I'm not positive. This research is showing us things like how grazing bison on an area instead of cattle can have benefits for the biodiversity of birds and deer, right? Because bison have a really different impact on streams than cattle do because of their tolerance for heat, because of the way they drink and the way they move across the landscape during the days. This is another one I think is really important. This is written by a whole bunch of different buffalo managers and fish and game managers from across the High Line, and looking at the ways that bison restoration is ecocultural, right, and has an impact on food sovereignty and food access and economic sovereignty as well. So really neat studies, and if you're interested in any of these, I'm happy to send you papers and send you links. And I'm going to turn it over here to Dusty now to talk about educational programming in American Prairie's Field School. So she's going to share that with you, and then I'll pop back up here and I'll just talk about a few ways you can visit the prairie and things you can do out there. So coming up, Dusty, do you want me to stay and click, or do you want to click through?
I can. Where's the video?
I will.
Okay, you'll come back.
Yeah. I'll just,
Okay. You're just doing this?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dusty Rixford, the education manager, and I'm just going to go skip the first one because just in the...
okay.
So I was hired to start the field school at American Prairie, and I wasn't quite sure what that was supposed to look like. I'm not really sure American Prairie knew. I just, ground up, I knew that the place was going to be at Antelope Creek Campground, which is right between Malta and Lewistown, north of the river. We have a campground there, and the reason is the reason to have the field school is to, like Corey was talking, that people aspect, to share the place, to we all learn in school mostly about the mountains and the rivers, and rarely about the prairies. And I don't know if you remember, like, what do you remember as in primary school? Like, do you mostly remember sitting in your desk, learning from the teacher talking, or do you learn more by hands-on doing, like, your experiences? And so that's what we wanted to create for students in Montana. So we have the American Prairie Field School. It's to engage kids, connect them to the outside, to the prairie, so that they learn to love it, so that they want to protect it for many generations to come. Okay. Yep, so there, under that umbrella of the field school is the overnight programming and day programming. So each May, I invite 4 schools, middle school, 5th through 8th graders, to the field school. They stay 2 nights and 3 days out on the prairie. We teach them prairie ecology. Corey was talking about the keystone species. It's fully funded, it's catered, so everything that they need is provided. It's a level playing field. And then also we have day programming at our Discovery Center in Lewistown. We invite schools to come for the day. A lot like First Peoples schools come, go visit, do programming there. And I can also come to schools because we are so remote in Lewistown. And then summer day camps, started that last summer. We're going to continue that with that again. What we offer is that all the programs are aligned to Montana state standards, and that's fully funded. So really special program. Okay.
Do teachers earn any credits?
Not for coming to the field school, but we have a teacher's workshop that they can earn credits, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So let's see, these are just some of the programs that we offer. And they kind of sound funny to adults, but we try and make them for kids. So Prairie slideshow, we don't actually have a slideshow. It's showing them pictures because they think like there's nothing out there in the prairie, like it's just an emptiness, it's boring, and we just show them the great biodiversity and how special it is. So then we also have the web of life. I don't know if you remember as a kid talking about the web of life and the connections that animals and plants have in the ecosystem, and we do a really cool activity with yarn, and we're all connected. And like Corey was talking about the keystone species, so one of the students might be a prairie dog or a beaver or a bison, and we talk about like, oh, the plague came through Prairie Dog Town, killed off all the prairie dogs, so the prairie dog drops their piece of the yarn and how it affects the entire web. We do Doggone It, about the prairie dog being gone. We do some nature mapping. The kids have journals, and so they do like one called sound mapping, where they close their eyes and they're just listening to what's around them. And it's just a really great way to center, to really take notice of what's around you. I'll talk about track plates and game cameras a little bit later. Prairie Mystery Animals is just skulls and furs, and how we can figure out what animal that belongs to. The plant roots are incredible out on the prairie, about like up to 15 feet deep, so we have a whole activity around that. And then talking more about medicinal plants, and we're getting a lot of help from our partners up on the Belknap community to help develop that program. All right. So these outdoor experiences are just really valuable to these students. Some of the children have never been out overnight, have never experienced the prairie, so they're nervous when they get there, but it's just fostering this comfortable education that they don't really realize that they're learning when they're out there. They're just having fun, and it's just this curiosity that they have. And it's just outdoor science versus science outdoors. You know, we're just getting kids outside of the four walls. Okay. This was our very first year. This was our classroom and dining hall, and it was cold, and we had mice, and there was mud everywhere, and I heard prairie mud, like the gumbo, and they did not want to leave when it was time to go. They had so much fun, and it just shows that they're resilient. You can have fun even when you're a little bit uncomfortable. We're still learning, and yeah, it was just amazing. So the next slide is a year later, and we're in a building. We've been closed. And there's heat and air conditioning and electricity, and it was just an incredible improvement. So pretty awesome. Here that they're looking at their camera photos from a game camera that they set up in the Prairie Dog Town, and we talk about placement. Where do you think like an animal? Where would look at this landscape? Where would you be traveling through? What would you be looking for? And there's been times where we've caught a whole day cycle of the sky because they pointed their camera at the sky, or they caught each other in photos. But they've also caught prairie dogs, and burrowing owls has been the big item. That's just everyone every year tries to get a burrowing owl, and we've done that every year. So yeah, problem solving, that's a big one. Let's see, so the track plates, the two Smithsonian researchers that you saw pictures earlier, Gila the woman, she developed these track plates, and it's like a triangle structure when you close the ends, and on each end they put charcoal, so a little critter walks across the charcoal. Then kids don't know what contact paper is, so we just say it's like sticky paper. But you put a sheet of contact paper, sticky side up in the middle with some bait, and we ask them, like, what do you want to use? You want to use Cheerios, peanuts, peanut butter, birdseed. They have all sorts of ideas. We've used like fruit snacks and such, but then it's also placement. Where do you think these animals are traveling on the landscape? And they place these track plates, and we come back and look at them a day later and see what tracks are across. And it's a lot of fun. They carry them all over the place, try different areas, use different bait. Signs of life on the prairie.
So how many wheelchair students are you able to accommodate?
We've only had Colin, that one little
Okay.
boy, come, and that was the first year when we were in a tent. You can see the tent in the background. But the students and the chaperones wheeled him every place that we would ever go. It was incredible. He carried the wheelchair and or wheeled him everywhere. It was quite fascinating and pretty endearing to see how his peers just include him in everything. Yeah, everywhere. Colin went everywhere. And then Indigenous knowledge. So this gentleman on the right, he's an elder, a budding elder up at the Belknap community, and he came down and told stories and told us about prairie plants. And then we also partner with the Ani Nakota Tours that Corey was talking about. This group comes to every field school session, and they teach traditional Native games, and it's incredible the lessons that the children learn. It's about honor and treating each other correctly, and it's not win, fight, push your opponent down. It's just a really fun, wonderful activity. It's the most favorite activity that we do for the kids out at field school. Next slide. So here they are playing shinny stick. I think this is shinny stick, or it might be double ball. I can't see the ball. But there, in essence, is no boundaries when you're playing this game. So they are all over the place, and they're having so much fun. Play is the highest form of research, and yep, it's pretty wonderful to see. We do a ceremony at the end that's pretty special. It's a blanket ceremony where the student that was the winner passes out all the gifts from the blanket to everybody, and the student that the Western side would call the loser is actually the winner, and they wrap that student in the blanket and just say this student had the most determination and perseverance, and honor that student. It's incredible. Oops, went too far. Yep, so, on the right, this is an actual bison skeleton. We call it our bison puzzle. Scott, the director
Director of Landscape Stewardship now.
Director of
Yeah.
Landscape Stewardship. He was our bison manager before. He has come out and taught the bison puzzle, tells all about the bison on the landscape, how they're a keystone species, and then they do this bison puzzle. So we scatter these bones everywhere, and they put it together, and it takes some doing, and there's lots of good conversation that comes out while they're doing this, and it's super fun because that bison is not fully bleached white. There's still skin. It's kind of stinky, but they don't mind it at all, and it's a blast. And every year we lose bones, so we're like, well, if this would have been here, but it's not here anymore. Yep. And then we're doing a plant study on the left over in discussing some plants, talking about their medicinal uses. So we talk about what is a prairie. This is a map in the students' journal. We hike to the highest point at Antelope Creek, and we point out the island mountain ranges, where they live, where they came from, where their school is, and talk about watershed, because there's the Missouri that we can see the breaks from there. And then on the right, the campground is surrounding a prairie dog town, which is just full of life, not just prairie dogs, and it's just entertainment. When we're not doing any activities, it's just constant entertainment. We've seen so many animals come through, and at night we take a walk down to the little pond and listen to the frogs. It's, a pretty special place. Lots of bird watching.
Do we have some of those weasels?
The black-footed ferret?
Right, yeah, there we go.
We don't have any on American Prairie,
Okay.
but the Belknap community does have black-footed ferrets up there.
So is there probability they'll migrate?
I think pretty high probability if we have healthy prairie dog towns for them, because they primarily only eat prairie dogs, and
Okay.
so they need a healthy community of prairie dogs.
You got it.
Yeah. Yep, and this is the other Smithsonian researcher that you saw in Cordy's slideshow on the left, Andy Boyce, and he's talking to the students about curlews and how he puts those little, we call them little backpacks, they're little trackers on, and he's showing them the mapping and all around, and what kind of habitat they need to nest in, and we talk about different heights of grass and how bison create those different mosaics. So how everybody's connected out there in the prairie. Let's see, and then this is our staff, Dr. Danny Kinka. He is also talking about habitat fragmentation and then also those heights of grass. He did this really neat activity with the kids where he had them act as different prairie plants, and he was like, okay, you're a short grass, you're over here, and so the kids were all different heights, and then he talked about which animals would utilize those those little niche habitats. All right, and this is our National Discovery Center in downtown Lewistown, a beautiful building. Please come visit if you haven't. It's incredible. It's a incredible display inside, full of knowledge, we have a night sky theater, the Ken Burns Theater that has some movies in there, just a wonderful display area. We also hold events like book readings and musical events, different talks. All right, this is the field school day programming flyer. And that's over on the table over here if you know any teachers or educators, if you want to grab that for. So we have all the way from kindergartners to high schoolers. We can tailor our programs to accommodate those to make sure that they're getting covered by the next generation science standards and also engaging them.
I love how you still put the high schoolers on the floor. That's awesome.
This is a game in the display area that kind of talks about what I was talking about, the web of life earlier, like, it was a great rain year and the grass grew, and so you're a fat bison, but then, something happens and, you might go back to start. And then we have a game camera display, a camera trap display on the right, where you can stand in the picture, you're in the game camera picture, and then you can email it to yourself. This is, we also do summer day camps. So we did 3 sessions last year. That was a lot for 2 of us after 3 weeks, but it was incredible. We did water wonders, talking about aquatic macroinvertebrates, We did a girls' STEM, and then we also did powerful pollinators. And on the left, we were out at Brewery Flats on Upper Spring Creek and doing bird and butterfly surveys. And I can't remember on the right what we were talking about. It might be like what birds or bees see, like how their eyes are and what their vision is like. And then teacher workshops, like you were asking about. So it's same model as the field school. We camp out at the overnight field school at the campground, do all pretty much the same activities, and give them ideas. So if they can't bring their students to us, what activities can they bring to their classroom? And they get continuing ed units for coming out. Once again, it's fully funded. We can help with the transportation cost and provide all the meals. Doing that again this year. There's a flyer over there, so if you know any teachers that want to come out. We use the teacher workshop as kind of like an avenue, so like as a test, so teachers come and see what the program is, and then we've had great success with the teachers that come to the workshop that they participate in some kind of programming with their students the following year. All right, and then this is a map of, I tried to capture pretty much every area that we've either had teachers come for workshops, or that I've traveled to their schoolyard, or that they've come to the Discovery Center, or they've come to the overnight field school at Antelope Creek Campground. So there are some places that we haven't reached yet, but the group over in Baker on the far east side, that was a FFA, a Future Farmers of America high school group that they were doing, it's called Agricultural Issues, and they pick a controversial subject, and they chose American Prairie to research, and they did a fabulous job researching, and they came to our Discovery Center, and for I think 5 or 6 of our staff, they did a presentation, like a mock town hall meeting representing all the stakeholders, and it was incredible. And they went on and got 6th in the nation for that presentation. Yeah. Yep. Do we have time for the field school video? We don't have to show it. You can look it on YouTube.
Up for a 3-minute video,
Sure.
or okay. Oh, I don't know if we're connected with sound with the HDMI. Are we?
Oh,
Put
it
the
should have
mic
been
down by
automatic.
Put the mic down by the computer.
Oh.
I don't know how Mac computers work.
The Serengeti or a coral reef, but very rarely was it someplace that I could go to, let alone walk to. And for many of the students in the Prairie schools, this is really truly their backyard. So the Prairie does double duty as this kind of place that we can rewild, but also as a classroom where students can learn about science while engaging in an environment that they are part of, an ecosystem that they live in.
We offer 2 types of programming: day programming at the National Discovery Center in Lewistown, and then we also have overnight programming at our campground north of Lewistown. And there, middle school students can spend 2 nights and 3 days out on the prairie. We look at the stars, we go for hikes. The campground is right on the edge of our prairie dog town, and the students are able to watch the prairie dogs and all the other animals through binoculars.
I think the most obvious thing that many people would expect with kind of like a prairie field school is that students will be learning a lot about, ecology, botany, biology, and that is certainly true. But the field school offers these other opportunities for related disciplines, whether it's astronomy or anthropology or even food sovereignty and what a sustainable food system looks like. All of these things are opportunities that we can teach in the field, on the prairie, when we think of it kind of holistically as this multidisciplinary place where there's people and there's plants and there's animals, and all of that has existed together for a very long time. There's quite a lot to learn about besides just, wildlife biology.
Yellowstone Forever and the Smithsonian Institute. Yellowstone Forever provides instructors.
And the Smithsonian provides research ecologists that come and present to the students at the field school. Their favorite thing to do is to learn to play traditional native games from Ani Nakota tours out of the Belknap community. It's just really great to see kids playing together out in the sagebrush and laughing, and it's just really special.
One of the hopes with giving kids the opportunity to learn outdoors in the prairie ecosystem is that there's this hope that by connecting with the system, connecting with the source of education in that very direct, physical, tangible way, that we're creating these memories that will carry people through whatever their careers become in the future.
The kids, when they leave field school, you can tell that there's a difference, there's a shift. They're comfortable in the outdoors, they don't want to go home, they really enjoy themselves.
Really great time, and you learn about like animals and how they live and where their habitats are. And you don't need your phone.
Dusty, did you have anything else?
Nope.
That was just your side. Okay.
I'm gonna go through
Oh no, YouTube's still going.
That's the
several
worst.
stories. and
Oh, it's Kurt.
Once YouTube gets going, he just likes to keep going.
That's true. We've gone a little over time because we are excitable, but I'm just going to take these last couple minutes and just run through some ideas and images and ways that you can come and visit us and you can see the prairie and you can spend time on American Prairie properties and get to know this landscape. Our property that is the closest to you here in Great Falls is the PN, the historic PN property at the confluence of the Judith and the Missouri River in the Breaks Country, wrapping around this gorgeous Cottonwood Gallery, gorgeous river on the Judith. It's really special. We have built 2 yurts and a cabin on that property that are available to rent. They're super fun to stay in. They sleep 8 to 9 people. They're in just these really epic view sheds, and they're surrounded by wildlife. So I'd love to share this image. This is the Lewis and Clark Hut, perched above a little channel on Missouri. I have never been here at dusk and not seen beavers active in this little channel right in front of the cabin. And I love to share this quote, which was taken from the log book, the guest book, a year or 2 ago. These were the first people who were in as visitors that year, and they wrote, "We were lucky enough to be the first into the cabin this year. About 55 degrees yesterday, snowing hard tonight, to be expected in April surely, and wildlife to be expected to some degree, of course, as well. But we have simply been overwhelmed. Here's a sampling: geese, pelicans, ducks, beavers, bald eagles, deer, coyote, turkey, black bear, bighorn sheep, red-tailed hawk, golden eye in the Judith River, kestrel. Almost all of the sightings just right from the deck or out the window. Truly stunning, gorgeous, humbling." The bottom 2 images there, one is the deck of that cabin, the other on the bottom left is the interior. All of these places have a little propane stove. They have solar power to run a fridge. Though they're dry, you have to bring in your own water. And then the 2 photos up top are from the yurts also on that PN property that just, circular yurt structures with a little communal kitchen and a couple of bedrooms.
You get there through Winifred?
Yes. Or if you're coming, actually the fastest way from Great Falls might be to come down through Big Sandy.
Oh.
I think I get there through Winifred from Lewistown, but I think you guys would actually come down through Big Sandy and cross the river from the north. This is our Antelope Creek campground. This is where the field school takes place. This is right off Highway 191, but it's just, what's really cool about it is that you're next to a major highway, and yet you feel like you were just out there on the prairie, and it's just kind of over the rise from the road, so you don't feel the road at all. And it's about 10 miles north of the Missouri River, so north of James Kipp campground there off Highway 191. It's got a 2-mile interpretive loop that's really well done, lots to learn about the prairie. Right next to a prairie dog town, as Dusty mentioned. It's got a handful of these little tiny comfort cabins that just have a couple of bunks. It's got RV hookups and tent camping sites and the nicest bathrooms in 50 miles. It's got a really nice bathhouse. We also have a more remote campground, Buffalo Camp. This is 2 hours down a gravel road in South Phillips County, just north of the CMR Refuge. It shares a boundary with the refuge, close to Fourchette Bay, which is a popular boating area, Fort Peck Reservoir. And it's on our Sun Prairie property where we have a herd of around 400 buffalo. And so this is a great place to really get out there, get far from the world, see bison, see this incredible ecosystem. And it's a rustic, simple campground. It's just got, a vault toilet, and then it's got these raised platforms for your tents so that the bison don't walk over top of you in the middle of the night. This is also that PN property, really epically beautiful breaks country, Missouri River country, some of the best sunsets I've seen in Montana on this property. American Prairie is a great place to come, check out wildflowers, come for the spring bloom when everything is just green, green, green. We say that the bison's birthday is May. The little red dogs, as we sometimes say, these little coppery calves are born in the spring, usually in May and June. Very, very cool to come and try to look for them and see them and observe them on the prairie. These guys are getting started right now. So the sage grouse, which are a very endangered, vanishing bird, prairie bird, will dance on their lek sites that they come back to year after year. And they're so weird. They never cease to amaze me. They have these huge air sacs in their chests that they inflate and they strut and they make these crazy sounds just to impress the ladies. There's not many places on earth that you can see them, but you can see them on the prairie. Last year, American Prairie made a decision to donate 100 acres at the confluence of the Judith and the Missouri River to the Montana State Parks Foundation. So there's some really, really significant historical buildings and structures right there at the confluence of the Judith and the Missouri. That's the historic Camp Cook / Fort Claggett. It was both at one time. This is the old Power Norris mansion, it belonged to Norris. So PN was the name of the ranch for Power Norris. The building that American Prairie has our offices in Lewistown is the Power Mercantile. There's a Power Street in Helena. Power was just like a cattle baron in the 20th century, and so also developed this property and was one of the original ranch owners here. So because of the historic value of that property and because restoration of historic buildings and sort of like large-scale interpretation of buildings is not really American Prairie's mission. We worked with the State Parks Foundation, and this will now be Montana's newest state park here in the next couple of years. And there'll be, really simple campground there, probably some picnic tables, low impact stuff, and hopefully some really great interpretation of the indigenous history and the ranch history and the frontier history of this site.
There's a bunch of people chomping at the bit to get that going.
Oh, with the State Parks Foundation?
Just historians.
Yes, it's really important. I mean, it's also, Lewis and Clark camped there. The Treaty of 1855, the Blackfoot Treaty, was signed there. Really significant treaty, kind of codifying shared hunting grounds in the region, just deep historical value. So it's been cool to see that happen and to have that partnership with the State Parks Foundation and the state. Dusty showed you some great pictures of our center in Lewistown. We're biased, but we think it's world class. It's really special. We worked with partners, with our own staff, with a great company specializing in natural history exhibits to design and build this center that's just all about the human and ecological history and significance of prairies and grasslands. I'm going to kind of close with just a couple of quick things. This is a photo I took at the Big Prairie Field Station deep in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. And this is a Forest Service sign that says wood, water, forage, wildlife, recreation. Which to me is just a reminder that there's a lot of value and a lot of use and a lot of diversity in how we think about our public lands and what those public lands are for. And certainly there's some folks and there's some voices out there who don't support the American Prairie idea and don't support what American Prairie is doing. And I think that often boils down to a disagreement about the highest and the best use of the land. And I think those are conversations that are really important to have. And when you think about that historic stretch of the Great Plains, right, 400 million acres in the United States, if American Prairie is successful in its mission to kind of connect and protect and glue together 3.2 million acres, that'll be less than 1% of that 400 million, for which for the most part is agriculture, grazing, crops, human development, less than 1% for wildlife and for people. And I will end with this quote from Wallace Stegner, who I'm sure you know, who grew up on the prairies of Saskatchewan, many of which are now plowed, and also here in Great Falls, spent some of his childhood here. And a lot of our grasslands and our prairies around Great Falls are used for row crop agriculture as well. And Stegner said, "A prairie big enough to carry the eye, clear to the sinking, rounding horizon, can be as lonely and grand and simple in its forms as the sea. It is as good a place as any."
Great Falls Public Library patrons, the time is now 7:45, and the library will be closing in 15 minutes at 8 o'clock. If you have any questions, please bring them down in circulation. The library will be closing in 15 minutes at 8 o'clock.
All right, that's our cue. It is as good a place as any for the wilderness experience to happen. The vanishing prairie is as worth preserving for the wilderness idea as the alpine forest. We'll take some questions if folks have them. We'll hang around for a few minutes before closing time, and please grab information and our cards and stickers and bandanas and totes. And thank you so much for having us. Thank you again, Sarah, and the library. Yes.
Do you have any abandoned wells on property that you've purchased?
I don't know. I mean, probably, but also like, because the majority of our properties are leased back for cattle ranching, like they need reservoirs and wells and water sources. So like we maintain, and I think with our BLM leases, we have a legal responsibility to maintain active wells and water sources.
For oil well.
Oh, oil wells. Oh, sorry, I thought you meant
Yeah.
water wells.
Yeah.
No idea. I don't think so. I don't think we're kind of like over the, the mother lode. But I really don't know. I'll find out. Any other questions? Dusty's getting numbers. No, yes.
Are you looking to expand out, and does it look like it's going to happen in the next couple of years with additional acreage?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so I mean, American Prairie, again, we've been around about 25 years. We expect to be around for hundreds, right? And like we're in progress, right? We're a project that's still young, I think. And so in our first 25 years, we have purchased private properties that allow us ownership or management of 500,000 acres. So we still have a ways to go towards that 3.2 million, which of course includes the 1 million CMR, right? So we're into, 1.5 million, pushing towards that 2 million mark. But yeah, we have a long way to go. And it'll continue to take time, right? And the idea is that if and when people decide to sell in the region, American Prairie is an option. And people know we're out there, people know we're interested. And so, some sellers come to us, we have brokers, we have a team of staff that's, available to have conversations about those sales and that are thinking about, prioritizing parcels that are available. And the idea is that properties that touch the refuge or the monument or properties that we already own, those are our priority. But yes, I do think we will, as part of our mission is that land buying and then taking that land and managing it for wildlife and people, and we're not done.
Now, is that FFA thing that got put together, is that available to anyone? Did they videotape at any time?
I don't know, Dusty. This gentleman was asking about whether the FFA group's presentation was like recorded or available.
I haven't, so I just learned that, I just learned this last week that they took 6th in the nation, so I haven't had time
So just
to.
this year,
This was from last year, but I was at a conference last week and I ran into a teacher from Baker and she said, oh, our FFA kids came, and I said, yeah, I remember, and she goes, they got 6th in the nation, so I haven't had a chance to go look to see if it's been recorded, but I might reach out to that teacher, because, I mean, that's pretty incredible. These students were amazing. They did such great research, and we just really appreciated that they came to us to, to make sure that their information was correct. Yeah, they did a fabulous job.
And they went to the stock growers, so they went to the Montana Stock Growers Association and presented their skit, their kind of mock town hall to them, and they came to us and presented to us, and they did tons of research. What's that?
At the Nile in Billings, which is happening, I think, right now.
I think it'd be good to get it out and have more people view it, both the pros and cons of what's happening.
Yeah,
Sure, yeah.
for sure.
Any other questions?
What's the biggest issue as far as difference of opinion with neighboring ranches?
I mean, I've been thinking about this for the last 4 years. I don't know if I have a concise answer. Do you mean like sort of if I could encapsulate like why people object or oppose? Yeah. I mean, I think American Prairie's existence is not a moral condemnation of agriculture. It's not an ecological condemnation of agriculture, but it is a different vision, and it holds so much in common, I think, which is why, why I care about it and why I really am invested in seeing more collaboration and seeing better relationships. But I think some folks out there feel that, American Prairie is a threat to their legacy, goes against their values, and that idea of the highest and best use of the land. And if you really believe that the highest and best use of all 400 million acres of the Great Plains is feeding people, then you probably aren't gonna like American Prairie. And I believe that that is a high and valuable use of the land, but I also think that setting aside some for wildlife is valuable too. And so it's just, sometimes it's really hard to bridge that gap. I mean, and ranching is hard, right? Like, it's a hard, rough scrabble life out there, and the margins are thin. And people have been leaving this region for the last 50 years, right? It's been kind of a slow trickle out of these communities because, farms consolidate because it's hard to make a living, or kids don't want to come back and take over the ranch. And some do. And I think that's really cool, but some don't. And so, oftentimes when people sell to American Prairie, they don't really go anywhere. Maybe they retire to a small home place. Maybe they retire to Malta. They're not like packing up and leaving usually. It's just maybe somebody doesn't want to ranch that place, or that's just a decision that they made, or they sold to us because they like us, right? Like, imagine that. Like, this property was sold to American Prairie by a family who signed a 12-year leaseback agreement on it. And so they've been running cattle on it for the last 12 years. They just signed another lease with us. And they sold it to us because they think that the vision is really interesting, and because of like economic factors and changes in the region. And so I think that there's a lot of sorrow, right, about communities becoming smaller. People want schools to send their kids to in Winnett and Malta and Jordan and Winifred. And I think it feels like American Prairie is sort of another tough thing in that world that's tough. And, somebody said to me once, like, change always feels like loss. And so I think that there's a lot of change in Montana, in the world, in central Montana. American Prairie is bringing change. And it's scary to some people. And I also want to acknowledge that in the early days, American Prairie dug a hole for itself with our messaging. And we went around saying, save the prairie, we're gonna save the prairie. And I think ranchers looked around and they were like, from us? And that was a bad message, and that was not the intention to condemn the stewardship that ranchers practice, but it was taken that way, and I understand why. So I think we're working to dig out of that hole and correct a lot of misconceptions and a lot of misinformation that's out there. And it's going to be a journey.
So you have some land over by Zortman that's inside of another, I'll just say conservation ranch?
Are you thinking about the Matador?
Yes.
We border the Matador. Where is it? It's like right in here.
Yeah.
So we have some neighboring properties to it. We're not inside it.
So I was just wondering if you guys do some stuff together
I think
as far as research and stuff.
we tried to do a fence project with them last year. I can't remember if it happened. There was a conversation about working on a shared fence. Not as much as we would like. I think, the Matador operates as a grass bank for ranching communities and, incentivizes conservation practices back home. And so they do a lot of work with ranchers, which is cool, and so do we. But I think that there's a little bit of concern on their part that partnering with us might be bad for them.
I helped Fish and Game trap some shark-tailed grouse there that
cool.
they shipped over to Ovando to reestablish the birds over there.
Oh, in Ovando? That's cool.
This year they're trapping them by Miles City to go over to Ovando, and they put those little receivers on them.
Oh, those little backpacks.
Yeah.
That's really neat. Yeah, I feel like I'd like to be a grouse in the Blackfoot Valley. That sounds good. All right, I think they're going to kick us out, so we'll wrap up. You can still come and chat with Dusty and I, or grab some items here.
Or go to
Thanks, everybody, again.
Thanks for coming, guys. We appreciate it. Stay tuned for future programming. If you want to see something here in the library and we're not scheduling it, reach out and I'll make it happen.